So today I'm working on a gun for a really good friend of mine, Ryan, and this is truly a labor of love because Ryan has been a huge contribution to the construction of Kelly Station. So Ryan's left-handed, and my first left-handed build. It is a kit, but I've come quite a ways with it. I've got the barrel totally inlet now. It's going to be a 54 caliber swamp barrel, left hand of course, and I've cut the stock to his trigger pull length that's desirable for him, and I've got the butt stock pretty much fit. I've left the wood proud on each side, which will allow me to do the finish work, but as far as wood to metal fit, I think I've got a pretty good fit there. And there's an old saying, you got your cart in front of your horse. Well, I'm not sure whether Benjamin Franklin said that or not, but if he didn't, he should have. He's famous for his quotes. And the reason I have my cart in front of my horse is that I'm building a gun building shop that's going to be specific to that purpose. And I've been working away at it, but I don't have it done. So I'm going to be back in the blacksmith shop today, and my friend Bob Miller is going to be dropping in, and I'm going to be learning from the master. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him, but I think he's built 30 plus builds, scratch builds, lock builds, hand files his own screws, for gosh sakes. So I'm going to do a lot of learning today when he arrives. I'm really excited about that. One of the things I've had trouble with is the thimble entry. I've always had an issue with that. Anyway, he's going to show me a few tricks that he uses that's going to make this work out really good. And because of Ryan's help, I want this gun to be perfect. So I'm taking my time with it. But I'll go show you my shop as far as I've got it. But like I say, I'm not going to be building it in the gun building shop, which sounds a bit ironic, but eventually my goal is to start scratch building guns. That old term, lock, stock, and barrel, I don't know how many years I got left, but my goal is to build one complete, including a barrel in the blacksmith shop, pouring the steel for plates for locks, making these springs, essentially the entire gun. Anyway, we'll see if I've got enough years left. So there's a lot of finesse in building a gun, and not so much in this. This is real grunt work. I finally got the chimney, the firebox done, obviously. The chimney I've got up to where it'll go into the attic and eventually through the roof. And over on this corner where I've got the big windows, I'm going to have my workbench along there. So when I'm working on guns, I'm going to have all this natural light coming right through. My bench is going to be about here. It'll be either a swing up door or barn doors. It won't be a window, but during the good weather I'll have that natural light, and in the winter I'll have candles. So I am the apprentice today, and I have my mentor Bob Miller here. He doesn't need much of an introduction because he's always here. And he's brought along a couple of his earlier builds. We're going to get into that a bit. He's brought along tools. I'd like to point out that this isn't going to be a tutorial on how to build a gun. We're basically talking about Bob's experience over the years. How many actual builds have you done, Bob?
42.
42 builds. Well, I've done 3. But Bob's going to tutor me, and as I mentioned earlier in my intro, I want to get to the point of doing total scratch build guns. So let's just start looking at a couple of Bob's pieces. This one I find more than any other one that you've done, Bob. This one fascinates me most. So I'm thinking German influence here.
Definitely.
A wooden trigger guard, for example. No butt plate. It's 62 caliber smoothbore.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you could explain a little bit how recent that was done. You've done a little silver inlay here, wooden side plate.
Entry pipe.
Wooden entry pipe, wow. And that's what you're going to mentor me on today. That's where the goal for today on my build will be. The part of builds that I struggle the most with is that entry pipe, and Bob's going to share a few tricks.
I do this for fun, and I wanted something for myself, and I thought what would somebody who had recently come up from the Mohawk Valley, Cherry Valley area, and basically didn't have very much. I'm basically a farmer who does some of this stuff on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And materials are the things that are, labor's cheap, materials expensive. So trying to get material, and a good example would be barrels are repurposed.
Mm-hmm.
So making do with what you've got, but you need a gun. So that was just my interpretation of someone who has some basic skills. They're not an expert, but was able to build a gun that works and indulge themselves in a little bit of fancy this or that here and there where they could. Because what interests me, as we were talking before, we have this experiential archaeology. Well, I'm experiential gunsmith.
Okay.
So it's a learn as you go. And I don't claim to have discovered very much at all, because the people who have done this before and who are still currently doing it, they're so free with what they know.
Knowledge.
So the knowledge is just freely shared. And when I'm showing some of this stuff, the main thing that I'm looking at is if anyone has a desire to build a gun, just do it. Don't be intimidated by the need for perfection. Some of these works of art, as I was showing before, a lot of the originals, they weren't hacks, but they weren't, show it over the mat.
Masters at their skill. No, for sure. Especially on the frontier, like we talked earlier, how a lot of the European guns were indeed works of art.
Yes.
But you also mentioned that it's pretty hard up here in Canada for us to get our hands on some of these original ones. The few times we are able to, we try to glean as much as we can from them. But I love this one, as I mentioned, the influence from your old country, if you would, and using those skills as you pick them up on the frontier. So let's look at some of the tools, Bob. You got some interesting planes here. So before we get into this, Bob's a luthier. So your livelihood over the decades have been made making musical instruments, primarily guitars, but also mandolins, violins. So this is just an extension of that. You know how to work with your hands.
Well, here's the thing. Poverty is it's not a foreign thing to me, so we're and we're still like that today, my wife and I. If we need something, if we can make it, we'll make it.
Mm-hmm. Which is a neat thing to have and actually grow those skills. So planes, you make
planes, chisels, obviously. A good rasp is extremely handy. I use scrapers a great deal.
Well, they didn't have sandpaper. If you look at a lot of those original ones, you can see the scrape lines in the wood, like these immaculately finished flintlocks we see today. This one's all scraped, and you can see that in the finish. Yeah, amazing. So you also make a lot of the parts. So there's the thing we're going to focus on today is an entry thimble. So you just start with sheet brass and make things like entry thimbles, side plates, etc. But also you mentioned, like, you can buy a lot of these components. There's a store-bought moon of a silver that would be inlaid into a gun, but you can always tell the difference from something that's manufactured and something that's home manufactured. So you'll take plate silver as an example, carve out your own inlays, etc.
It just looks different.
Absolutely.
The same with triggers. You can buy a preformed trigger. I prefer to make them.
And I noticed too, talking about making, you don't start with the steel, you start with bits of paper.
Paper's cheap.
Paper's cheap. So there's an example of a trigger that you're starting to work on there.
And I'll lay everything out with a, these, again, how many times have I run into people will say, oh, well, this doesn't fit, or I'm having problems, but trying to fit everything on paper first, so you know where everything goes.
Here's another thing that absolutely fascinates me, Bob. Not just your things, you fascinate me, but this one particularly. So Bob's made a clay mold, and you can see the motif here, but that's going to be, when it's cast, goes down into the mold like so, is going to be the front sight for a musket.
Yeah, I poured a silver sight for a musket with that.
That's beautiful. That's
and
beautiful.
Again, wondering how they would have done it, and that's possibly one way.
And I like the handmade tools fascinate me as much as the gun, like this little plane. That's another tool. You got your fingers on there, Bob.
Yeah, this is just for doing some of the molding work around the ramrod trough.
Like on the other musket.
Like on this one. Or here's an example here. You can see where it's got some shaping done to it. And this particular tool is just like an advanced type of scraper that I made up. But you can change, you can file. Just because you have a tool doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Like one of the things that I often do is I've got a number of the old molding planes, and I'll take the blade and fashion it into something that I want it to do, and then it becomes a tool. That tool does what I need it to do, not what it was originally meant to do.
Versus something just sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, this is for a lock.
For the cock.
So that's the cock, yeah. This is going to basically be that right there.
There you go. And is that hand filed threads on that?
No, that's for the screw plate.
Screw plate, yeah, which was a common tool. I don't see one of those here today.
I grabbed what I thought, I'm sure there's
demonstrate.
things that I missed.
This is I should point out too, this is the tool used for boring the ramrod tube into the back part of the musket, correct?
Yes.
An original style of cutting bit. So what else do we have there, Bob?
Well, again, making screws.
We've got square from round, back into round, into the taper, into the slot, and then the start of the hand-filed thread. Perfect. Well, shall we go into my not new building gun shop, but my blacksmithing shop and
Sounds
see if
good.
we can do a little actual whittling. The other thing I want to do is do a bit of relief carving like you do on a lot of your muskets on Ryan's. So maybe I can get some ideas today on how I'm going to lay that out on the wood. And I can whittle away at that when you're not here, but you're going to counsel me through this one. As I mentioned, I want this gun to be perfect, and I got the fellow to show me how to do that.
I haven't built a perfect one yet.
They all work. They all work.
They work.
They all make meat. I just realized that Bob and I are the same vintage. So when you add it up, combined, we have 142 years of experience working on this build today. 142 years. Man, we're old. We are old. Shall we get at it?
I don't feel old.
I don't either.
So the first thing we need to do is find the center line. We don't want to inlet this crooked, which is easy to do, believe me. So this is all going to line up. And once we can get the tab inlet, then we're on the way. And on these pre-made thimbles, they always give you a lot more than you require, so that's got to be cut off.
Because that'll come right down into the bottom of the barrel, right?
Exactly. And on my own, what I'll usually do is I'll actually cut this too, so that I'm not inletting right up to the edge of the thimble here.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I don't need that. And again, it just complicates things for me. I mean, maybe not for everyone, but for me. So I'll typically get rid of this, and I'll cut this down based on what the web is. So what I found to make it easier for me, again, I'm not saying this is the correct way, but it is easier for me to do it this way, is I'll position it the wrong way around first, because this is the important thing to get inlet first, and then this tang will follow. So once this is done, then I can just turn it around, and it makes it all a lot easier to get this in line rather than trying to get the whole thing in at once. File it down. That's coming up. I wonder how many 71-year-old gunsmiths that will actually still make a living. We have this inlet. What I'm interested in doing now is just removing the wood that's preventing the thing from going down. I'm not trying to inlet the whole thimble or the back tang. It's just that particular area right there that's touching. And I'll usually use either pencil, like rub pencil on it, something that'll give me an indication of where the high spots are. And once I can get this level, then we'll file a slight bevel on this piece, and then we can inlet that down. And start inside the line.
we ran out of time with Mr. Miller yesterday, and he had to depart. He got a good start for me. I'm back at it today, and this is a grand day for doing this because it's pouring rain, and I don't have to I don't have to set rock on a chimney, which is a nice break, almost like a holiday. Anyway, I've almost got this fit, and I'm on to the next part. I've got the lock almost done, so a little bit of work to do, and I'll have it inlet. And yeah, pretty soon this thing's going to go bang. There's a lot of people out there that think that they mightn't have the skills to do this. It's not really that complicated. It's just you have to be slow, you have to be methodical. That old saying in woodwork, it's a lot easier to take wood out than to put wood back. So you, especially with cherry, I find working with walnut or even striped maple a lot easier than cherry. Cherry's hard to do your chisel work on. It tends to want to chip a lot. So, and I'm going to do a little relief carving in the stock, which is going to be fun. This seems to be quite a gnarly piece of wood. But there are a number of things. Mike Miller has produced a DVD on his take on a reproduction of Daniel Boone's rifle that he would have carried, or probably a very close facsimile of what he would have carried through the Cumberland Gap in the 1700s. And it's a 5-hour and something minute video. It's a very in-depth, and yeah, if you want to undertake this project, that would be a good thing to pick up.